and Brian will do us the honor of sharing scripture today.
The scripture today is Matthew chapter 9, verse 35 through chapter 10, verse 8. I'm just looking at it now for the first time, and there's no hard names. Okay. Jesus continued touring all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of God's reign and curing all kinds of diseases and sicknesses. At the sight of the crowd, Jesus' heart was moved with pity because they were distressed and dejected, like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus said to the disciples, "The harvest is bountiful, but the laborers are few. Beg to the overseer of the harvest to send laborers out to bring in the crops." Jesus summoned the 12 and gave them authority to expel unclean spirits and heal sickness and diseases of all kinds. These are the names of the 12 apostles. The first were Simon, nicknamed Peter, that is Rock, and his brother Andrew, and then James ben Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew the tax collector, James ben Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. These 12 Jesus sent out after giving them the following instructions. Don't visit Gentile regions and don't enter a Samaritan town. Go instead to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, make this proclamation. The reign of heaven has drawn near. Heal those who are sick, raise the dead, cure leprosy, expel demons. You received freely, now freely give.
Thank you, Brian. So tomorrow is the second anniversary or commemoration of Juneteenth as a federal holiday in the United States. It only took a couple hundred years, but we're making progress. As we were told before, the arc of the moral universe bends ever so slowly toward justice. And sometimes it goes backwards, but then it's still pointing that way. In a moment, I'm going to invite Mr. Bill Stewart up here, who's the president of the Black give me the whole name properly. The
Foster City Association of Black Residents.
I get it with Foster City Association of Black Residents. And they threw a fabulous party, which Island United helped to sponsor, at the rec center yesterday. It was a joyous occasion. They wanted to celebrate, and we did indeed. So I just will share with you before I ask him to come on up. So this came from the headquarters, District of Texas, Galveston. I'm tired. Galveston, June 19th, 1865. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them that becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness, either there or anywhere. No one gets a break. Will you join me in prayer? God of the weary years, God of the silent tears, faithful God who has brought us thus far, meets us and you who keeps us. How often we forget you. We forget you when we do not honor each other. Rather than celebrating our differences together, we create the other and make a less than. Bless us and our differences. Fill us with the courage to stand together in the face of oppression and injustice in this world. Help us to see that we are, each of us, made in your radiant and beautiful image. May the words from my mouth and our mouths and the meditations of all our hearts bring comfort to those who seek it and conviction to those who need it. And may these things be pleasing unto you. Amen.
Amen.
So last week we looked at Matthew 9, verses 9 through 13, 18 through 26. We saw Jesus dining with the sinners and the tax collectors. I would have been there too. The woman with the 12 years hemorrhaging being healed. The raising of the synagogue official's daughter. And in chapters 8 and 9, we find out that Jesus was really busy in that healing department. He cleansed the leper, healed the centurion's servant, Peter's mother-in-law, and a bunch of others who just seemed to be dropping by to Peter's house for some, quick healing. We saw the Gerasene demoniacs with the help of those pigs be cleansed. There was the paralytic on a mat, those two blind guys, the mute demoniac. And when he wasn't busy healing, he calms the seas, teaches here and there, and invites Matthew, one of those tax collectors, to join the motley crew that he is putting together. Now, if he does windows, I would say, sign me up. And this week we hear that Jesus is continuing to tour all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of God's reign and curing all kinds of diseases and sicknesses. At the sight of the crowds, Jesus' heart was moved with the pity because they were distressed and dejected, like sheep without a shepherd. And Jesus summons the 12 and gave them the authority to expel unclean spirits and heal sickness and diseases of all kinds. Well, the instructions are pretty clear as to what they are supposed to do. They have seen what he has done, and they are commissioned to travel the land, to do as he has done, and spread the good news. His healing and his liberative message. Instructions. We are given them regularly, but do we receive them? This year on June 1st, a press release was sent out by the National Archives to display Emancipation Proclamation and Juneteenth General Order number 3. They will be doing it yesterday and today and tomorrow. And here's what the snippet of the proclamation or the press release said. Featured in the East Rotunda Gallery would be the Emancipation Proclamation. The proclamation which President Lincoln issued on January 1st, 1863, as the nation approached a third year of civil war. And his proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states, take quote of that, within the rebellious states, are henceforward shall be free. It was as fit and necessary war measure for suppressing rebellion. The proclamation also declared the acceptance of black men into the military service. By the war's end, almost 200,000 black soldiers and sailors had fought for the Union and freedom. And despite its expansive wording, the Emancipation Proclamation was limited. The freedom it promised was dependent upon a Union victory. It also applied in 10 Confederate states. According to the records, it leaves more than 500,000 men, women, and children in bondage in parts of the Confederacy already under Northern control and loyal border states. These are things I don't quite remember all the time in my history. So still states that were within the Union or loyal to the Union were allowed to hold on to their slaves during this transition. Tell us that nevertheless, the Emancipation Proclamation promised freedom and a new beginning for several million Americans, and it transformed the character of the war. It recognized the moral force behind the Union and caused and strengthened the Union both militarily and politically. It was a milestone along the chattel slavery's final destruction, and it was assumed as a place of great documents in the nation. And on the other side of the gallery, the west side, the freedom promised in the emancipation was finally delivered to 250,000 people who remained enslaved in Texas. 2.5 years after Lincoln's historic proclamation, and 2 months after the Civil War was won. That was the document I read to you earlier. June 19, 1865, U.S. Major General Gordon Granger issued General Order Number 3. I'll listen to it again. The people of Texas are hereby informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, 2.5 years earlier, all are free. All slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights, and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes between employer and hired labor, rather than free labor, of course. They're just to pay them a pittance. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their homes and work for wages. So they really don't get to leave where they were living, nor is there, even though the 40 acres and a mule were promised, or those out there. They informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts. It's a contradiction to what Mr. Lincoln said. And they will not be supported in idleness, either there or everywhere. So there were instructions given, reinterpreted, and delivered with just a little delay. So with that, my friends, I will invite Mr. Bill Stewart, the unofficial mayor of Foster City. I said this in front of the mayor yesterday, who kind of looked at it and walked away. Alexis fix that issue later. Mr. Bill Stewart, will you please come up and share your wisdom with us?
Should I use this?
You may use that one. If you want to take it off, you can take it off. You can leave it there or adjust it however you need it.
No. I was thinking about what I could share with you all today. Those of you that were able to come, some of you all received a copy of this article that was put together by one of the committee members on Opal Lee, who is designated as the mother of Juneteenth. She was born in, I think it was 27. She's 97 years old. She's still alive. She was at the ceremony with the president when he signed the order that Juneteenth was an official holiday. And Alexis, who's always more ambitious than I am in terms of what you can get done in a short amount of time, said, boy, next year we can expand this and maybe we can have Opal Lee to come as our speaker. And I said, right. Maybe we ought to at least make provision for her to speak remotely. The lady is 97 years old. He said, no, she will have her here. We'll combine all the groups and so forth. So we'll see how that works out. But what I decided that I would spend a few minutes sharing with you is something that I really stole from a lady that I went to hear a couple of weeks ago, Miss Abrams, who ran for governor in Georgia, and she gave a speech that really just kind of jumped into her life at a certain age. I think around 17, she was at the point in life that many 17-year-olds are at, where they think they know everything. And their parents don't know anything enough. And she went to a city council meeting when it was time for people to make some remarks. She jumped up, blamed the city council, the mayor, for the conditions that some of the minority people found themselves under, and that they had not done anything to cure the problem. It just happened to have turned out to be the first time that a black guy had been elected as mayor of Atlanta, a name by the guy in the name of Maynard Jackson. And she said in about 5 minutes after she sat down, he immediately took her sermonizing apart. Really embarrassed her. How much stuff had been tried, and how he was now the first mayor of Atlanta. And she didn't hear anything from him for 3 weeks. And he called her and said, I appreciated your remarks, and what I have established is a youth forum that I want to be part of the leadership that leads us into the new era and how we approach this whole thing of equity. And I'm appointing you as the chairman. So you have to be careful when you think you know what to do, because somebody may ask you to do it. But anyway, I thought that I would just borrow her technique a little bit and share with you a few stories. Last time I had an opportunity to talk with you all, I talked about being reborn and what that I thought meant to me. I was around 10 or 12 years old, as I recall. And those of you that remember the gist of my remarks at that particular time, it was, and I won't repeat the whole thing, that about 2 a.m. on a very wintry, cold night, someone was knocking on our door, and it turned out to be a white guy who was soaked from the rain, and he was asking if he could come in and warm up. And my mother and father jumped into gear. My mother heated up some food, got the guy warm, gave him something to take with him, and so forth. Well, you have to put this in a little bit of context, and that is he had to walk through the white neighborhood to get to the black neighborhood where I grew up. And we think that some things have changed, but we found out that the races are still segregated more now by housing than they were then. That was over 70 years ago. So one kind of began to wonder, are we getting it? Are we getting any place? Or should we take a new approach? Or what is the solution? Well, I have been thinking about this, and it turned out that when I turned 50 years old, I had a birthday party in Las Vegas, and I just started writing down old friends of mine that I had grew up with, gone to school with, relatives, and I had this long list of names. I sent them a note and called them and said, turning 50, I'd like for you to meet me in Las Vegas. Much to my surprise, 100 people showed up from Tennessee, Memphis area where I grew up, Chicago, Minneapolis, Florida, all 100 people. And kind of knowing a little bit about some of them background, I had made a reservation with a restaurant in Las Vegas that's called Hush Puppies, specialized in seafood. And I had made arrangements for to rent the place for the night. And they served fried fish, shrimp, all you can eat. This was a grand occasion, and some of the people contacted me afterwards and said that they really not only enjoyed, this getting together with everybody, but it was an opportunity for them to see my family, my sons, son-in-laws, members of the family, and much to their surprise, they could not look out over the crowd and say, "Oh, that's obviously part of Bill Stewart's family," because there had been so much intermingling among the races and marriages and kids and grandkids. My wife's younger sister, who is 20 years younger than my wife, married a white Canadian Jew who is an MD. They had 2 children. Her son, who is now a lawyer, has not married, but he has had many girlfriends along the way, and they have been all kinds of races, raised from different races. My niece is married to a Mexican, and he had 2 children when they got married, so she's now raising a couple of Mexican kids that are not hers. And that's an interesting, because he has pretty much turned them over to her. As it is in a lot of marriages, the mother becomes the mother. My brother-in-law, who is one who came along late in life, is married to a Caucasian lady who was a sales clerk at one of the big department stores. So it's not in terms of somebody marrying up or down. These people get together and do whatever you do. Their daughter is 21 years old. She has graduated just recently from University of California, Fullerton, and later this afternoon they're having a graduation party for her that I'm attending. Yeah, she's up here. She's now works for Disneyland, and it became obvious to me that maybe one solution to people getting together and really genuinely love each other happens if they're part of a family. Now this kind of flies in the face of some of the far-right people who seem to have been worried in the past about races being separate and pure. But they also impose this: if you got one drop of black blood in you, you're black. It turned out that a friend of mine who's very, very, very much interested in where he came from in Africa, whether he's Nigerian or Guatemalan, whatever, went through this DNA analysis, and it turned out that he has more Irish blood in him than he has black, African. And it was because of the unofficial mixing with the slave masters and the slave masters' slaves over the years that they already mixed. I also noticed that in talking with my with my nieces and grandnieces and so forth, that the whole subject of race kind of just melted away, you know, that I suddenly became Uncle Bill to everybody. The Mexican part of the family, the Japanese part, everybody, and what they brought with them was their background. And so I began to eat sushi along with my barbecued ribs. It became a mixture that kind of naturally got rid of the need for us worrying about differences, because we were all part of the same crowd. A couple of little stories that I'll share with you before I end this is that I tried to think about what am I trying? What do I want to happen? And I again borrowed from the church, and I remembered that the minister of the churches, when they were giving a sermon, they always gave a text. Yes, here's what I'm going to tell you. And then at the end, hopefully, they told you that and they'll remind you of it. And so I decided, I said, what am I trying to do? And I said, what am I trying to do is, where do we want to go? And how do we get there? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? There's just a couple of little scenarios to this that involved me and what I thought I could do to try to make a little difference. I enjoyed going by a restaurant at the usually I went by at the close of the day, and I would buy big platters of some ribs and barbecued chicken and coleslaw and so forth to take home. And this particular day, I went by this restaurant, and there was a poor guy who apparently had realized that at the end of the day, he would go by this restaurant to see what they were throwing away. And he was there making his plea for that when I walked up. And the guy that was the owner of the restaurant, unfortunately, said, "Oh, I don't have anything today, Charlie. I'm sorry, you know." And then he, was anxious to get to me. He said, "Yeah, you'd ordered some stuff," and started telling me. Yeah, he said, that guy comes by every day at the end of the day and asks for that. And I said, okay. I said, now I see you have some stuff over here in this big dish and got stuff here. I said, how much is it if I just bought it all? No, he named the price, and I said, put it into some big containers. Paid him, and then I drove down the street to find that guy that wanted food. Gave it all to him. And told him that you can find other people who need something and share it. And that's all I want you to do for me, is to share the story. That if it's something that you can do to alleviate suffering in the world, do it. And another little story was I worked for NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, for a number of years as a physicist, where I worked on re-entry vehicles. The nose cone on the re-entry vehicles were very vulnerable to heat when they re-entered the atmosphere, and as you recall, unfortunately, there was one casualty where first school teacher that went out on a mission burned up coming back into space. And the reason that happened at that particular time is because the re-entry mechanism that we had put in place that had worked required that recoat the nose cone of the missile with oxidizing substance. And you guys have probably heard this from physics, is that that nothing is ever lost. It's transformed. So the trick was to transform this solid nose cone coating from the solid into a liquid and into a gas. Keeping in mind the second law of thermodynamics just allowed things to change, and what it changed was it carried the heat away with it as it changed from the solid to the liquid to the gas. And unfortunately, somebody said, boy, we're spending extra money doing this. Came up with a different method, caused this terrible accident to happen because of trying to save money. I hear that we are up against many challenges in life today where people are using money as an expedient way of doing things, and will throw away perfectly good stuff because they can't make money off of it. That we have more food being produced in the cornfields of Iowa, and the people are plowing it under instead of shipping it to countries where they need food. And they said, well, we can't afford to have it harvested, trucked to the factories and canned and whatever. Well, it seems as though those are problems that can be easily solved. And we need a new way of thinking about it in terms of the whole family, and and seeing what we can do. And I'll share with you this one last thing, which I think kind of epitomizes what could be done if the attitudes were there. My father-in-law I had the opportunity to tell this story to a friend of mine who was Japanese. When his father passed away. At NASA, every payday, which is every 2 weeks, a group of us would go out in Mountain View and have Chinese food for lunch. This one guy, we let him do the ordering, since he knew more about the food and so forth. And one day he did his usual thing, ordered the food and so forth. And then after the waiter left, he said, well, this will be interesting, because I was talking to the waiter, and usually it's a Chinese waiter. He wasn't, he was Japanese. And so I didn't change anything about it. He appeared to understand what I was saying, and he obviously knew that I knew he wasn't Chinese. I didn't know he wasn't Chinese. Anyway, we went on to talk about the differences in people and how certain people recognize different people by different groups. And at the time, it was illegal in California to desegregate by housing, that you could legally, and some of us still have deeds to our houses that have these segregation policies written in. We just haven't, they're illegal, but they're still in there. If you go down and ever look at the deed at the county seat. This particular guy said to me, he says, I would really like to not have to sell my house to a black person if it caused my housing value to drop. I wouldn't like for my neighbors to sell their houses to black people if it caused the housing prices in my neighborhood to drop. And he was saying that especially to me, and one of the reasons was that here we were, all pretty much on the same footing in terms of background. Physicists, engineers, of some caliber, working on one of the most important projects, technical projects in the country. End of the story is this. The Japanese were incarcerated as part of the concentration camp stuff. My father-in-law was approached by his Japanese neighbor and said, Albert, because of all of this problem, we're going to be incarcerated. And rather than just walking away from my house, I'm going to give you the deed to it. And my father-in-law took the deed for the number of years that they were incarcerated, he rented the house, paid the notes. When they got out of the concentration camp, he gave the guy the deed back with the house fully paid for. They were shocked to the journey. Why did you do this? And he said, you would have done the same for me. And so it gave me the opportunity to say to my friend, this is the way life should be. And if we can all get together and live like family, I think we can make some progress. So thank you for allowing me to share some old stories. I have plenty more in store for you for the future.
and we'll be waiting for them. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I was thinking, as I heard him say, about 17-year-olds know everything. And I looked over and I saw Daryl looking at Anna going, mm-hmm. And I remember being 17 years old and going, mm-hmm. And then I know the more I know I don't know. So that's coming along, mm-hmm. And then when Mr. Stewart was talking about, well, you got yourself a job. Well, it reminds me of when I was doing my internship at City of Refuge with Bishop Flunder, and she used to talk about, I'm busy looking ahead, I can't look in the rearview mirror. Because somebody would come up with a great idea, and she'd say, that's a great idea, now go and do it. So I don't know a lot, the more I know I don't know, but I know this. He said family. We talk about the kingdom of heaven, where there is no Jew, no Greek, no slave, nor free, no, the east or west. We sang the song, which is one of my favorites. And I wonder what keeps us living from fully into it. We talk about sickness and death and marginalization, and we like to call demons. And I'm not talking about the demons that today we associate with mental illness, because that further stigmatizes mental illness rather than lifting it up and recognizing it and being what it is. No, not demons. The demons are these things that are evil. There is evil in the world. We have to say that. Just note it. The evil that is around us and the evil that sometimes lives within ourselves. And we can call those the demons of racial and economic injustice, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia. Whether or not we like it, we are part of these systems of oppression. And there are many that are obvious to us. And there are the many insidious and obfuscated ones that we have to work around, and we have to exercise them and dismantle them. I love your story about paying off the note. And if you recall, we had, after 30 years of sitting in the government, trying to figure out yes, no, this one, right, there was finally a reparations toward those who were interned in the Japanese camps. I was coming down this morning, Brett and I were listening to the radio as we do on KQED, and there's a woman who was talking about the Juneteenth celebrations. And she talked about the African American descendants of slaves are probably one of the only communities in the United States that has not been given reparations for 275 years of free labor to those of us who benefited from it. And people always say that there will never be enough money to pay it back, but there's something there that needs to be repaired. I mean, they paid the slave owners for lost income, for freeing the people. We figured out how Haiti could pay back France and the United States for their lost income and investments. So we should be able to figure out this. So Jesus said, heal those who are sick, raise the dead, cure leprosy. I gotta get my glasses here. Now I'm going back onto the lines. Cure leprosy, expel demons. You received freely, now freely give. You just said that. Freely give. Giving and receiving and listening and learning. Relationship. It's freeing, it's liberating, it's loving, it's celebrating. That's what revitalizes faith. Doing such social justice and sharing the good news of the kingdom that is possible when we come together as one. You know, I mentioned before, and I think you've heard this from others, that, you know, we talk about Easter. Easter, that one time a year we come together and we talk about the transformation and the new life and the rebirth. And Juneteenth, noting the emancipation, the Freedom Day, when finally freedom came to everyone, well, in a certain way. But we're all still working for that emancipation and that true freedom that all of us will get one day. So Juneteenth and Easter, they're not one day a year. I think we have the opportunity every day to think about, well, how am I going to be liberating and freeing today? How am I going to be transformed today? So it's not just an annual observance, it's a daily, when I wake up in the morning, it's an observance and go, think about it. And each day we ask these questions. What will be my transformation that will lead to my liberation that can be shared as good news for all so that we can create that kingdom we want here on earth? Amen.